I read everything. So I know that a lot of thought went into the founding principles. I know that a lot of experts were consulted, and I agree. I totally agree with this sort of utopian existence of a blend of nature, of being able to having these quadrants of Reston where sure you can go out of your quadrant, but you have within a few minutes travel time, a dry cleaners, a nursery, a shopping center, and whatever you need. And then also the diversity aspect. It's, I guess, back when Mr. Eichler was talking about when they said don't move across the bridge, some of the diversity element was huge at that point. And I think that, because of the fact that, people have been, good custodians of the 7 founding principles is why, African Americans and people, non-whites have felt comfortable and have been able to thrive and be successful in Reston. And as far as what I said is a priority, I think all of these are, basically cogs in the wheel. They all work together, and each one of these principles should be, upheld in order for the community to thrive.
I don't have all 7 memorized, but they're all very important to me. The ones that always really stick to me, professionally, I'm a social worker. And so one of these that really come to mind is the dignity of the individual. So no matter who you are, you can be the multimillionaire here, or someone who just moved into public housing, or an individual, or a big, huge family. Everyone belongs, and you really don't feel left out here. If you do, there's someone who's going to pick you up and make you feel like you belong. As a parent liaison at Terraset School, and we welcome so many international families, but it's that whole thing of everybody belonging, and that every individual is important, and you don't feel left out, or that you don't belong. And so that's really important.
And I think a lot of that was really good. The other thing that strikes me is first of all, having the principles actually codified, actually having them written out, having that sort of that combination, if you will, of sort of vision and mission for what Reston is, was critical. There are a lot of places that get developed that don't have that, and it just sort of becomes whatever the free market wants to do that day, and you end up with, I don't want to start disparaging some of our neighbors, but let's just say that some of the land use choices that have been made by our neighboring communities, we drive through them and we question them. Okay, I'll name Sterling. I don't know, right? There's some parts not so great, and so part of it that I actually gravitate to as well is the 6th principle about beauty really being so important to the good life. I think that helps to motivate why you keep the trees, why you keep the streams, why you have the beautiful lakes, the beautiful architecture. Without that, I think that that it really becomes a very different place. And I think that when you really understand why you're keeping up the natural and built structures as they are, and keep on making new ones, I think that's really important.
I was going to say the same thing as Paul. I think some of the importance of the principles is the fact, A, that they exist, and B, that they're alive. We're 50 years into Reston, and if there are such things, principles for starting a community in other places or a town, I wouldn't bet that they're spoken to very often. So the fact that they're alive, and we as native Restonians or those who learn the Reston way come here, we share them and we continue to live them and speak to them. So I couldn't pick one out from another in terms of their importance. But I just think the fact that they exist is what makes them so important. I did think of one thing that might be missing. I just thought of this. We talk about being able to live in this single community your whole life. What about a continuing care facility? That's a true continuing care place where people can live independently and move one building over and have assisted living, and move one building over and be in a full nursing care. My dad lives in one of those in Lewis, Delaware, and that would enable those people who have lived here their whole lives to remain here. And they're a wonderful concept, so don't chair me, I'm not the chairperson of the committee or anything, I just thought it was an idea.
No, I much appreciate your responses to that question, each of yours. And the final question that I'd like to ask, and I'd like to rephrase it. The question as written was, as a resident, what is your contribution to Reston, and why did you move back? I'd like to broaden that a bit. I think it was Vanessa who used the words good custodians. Well, I'm sorry, that was Katie?
I did, but
Well, I'm counting on the two of you. In our future role as we continue to live in this community, and I just want to reflect on two cities that I have had experience with. One is living in Detroit, and the other is visiting DC frequently. And there is always identified in some demographics. The two I wanted to talk about is one, there's the black neighborhood, or there is the poor neighborhood with all the public housing and those kinds of things. I think the way Reston has been planned and being developed precludes that from happening in our community, in our city. And my final paraphrase of that final question is, as good custodians, we're turning this Reston development, community development over to the millennials. And as a good custodian, what would you prioritize of the principles, rather than whether they're good or bad, as a focus for community action, community support? Is it, and how would you envision that over the next 20, 30, 40 years?
Wow, that's a really different question. What would I prioritize? I think we touched on two of them tonight, and I think those are the two that probably would need the most community action, and that's, we talked about the affordable housing, and we talked about the preservation of beauty and nature. And I think those are the two things that probably are going to require the most community support in order to be maintained at the level that they are now, or to hopefully even get better over time. So that if I had to prioritize two, those would be them, or those would be they. What is that? Those would be the two that I would prioritize, just because I think those are the two that are going to need the most help from the community. And I'm lucky enough to, have it be my job to be the custodian of these principles as the executive director of the Reston Museum. It's a dream come true. It gets to be my career. I get to devote a lot of my time to it. So I look forward to hear what the rest of the panelists have to say, because I'll focus on it. I want to make sure we get the word out to everybody that lives here.
As far as there are certain, there's one, okay, well, there's definitely, the preservation of nature, the affordable housing, which I mentioned earlier. I also think that as sort of lifetime Restonians, quote unquote lifetime Restonians, we do have that responsibility to, to just kind of, let people know that this is the community, and that you're coming into a community. You don't need to honk your horn on Sunday, and you don't, just the certain things that, the certain dignities that we sort of, reserve for each other. Especially when I was growing up. I mean, people just really didn't honk their horns in a parking lot. I mean, it was just kind of, not nice, not something that you would do to your neighbor. And people considered people wherever they were from in these parking lots as their neighbors. So I think that, we definitely have to, sort of reinforce good manners in our community. And also, individuality in terms of shopping and in terms of restaurants, and sort of supporting, like there's Reston Town Center, there's a lot of different places to go, but everyone is a chain. Every single one of those places is a chain except for a few. And I don't see the traffic in the places that are not the chains. And I think that, it's really important, because I love when I go to Old Town Alexandria, that feel of, just these shop makers just, exuding their own personalities into the retail market. And, and it's important for a community. And I think that that's one of the things that we should encourage and uphold is, the sort of mom and pop or the one-off business.
I was thinking about what Katie said, and if you put all the principles together, I think they have to be together. There's like a marriage, so they kind of work together. But the whole thing about making sure that people can stay in Reston if they want to, and the affordable housing is crucial. It should be a place for everybody. I remember a few months ago, something was posted in the Reston Patch, and a Restonian, I know this person, I will not say the name, but it was shortly after something bad happened in Reston, and what she wrote is, public housing is wrecking Reston. I know she's relatively new to Reston. I'm like, wow, it's been here since the beginning, but it went on some more nasty things that came out, but it is a place for everybody. There's dignity for everybody who lives here. It's not just a place for millionaires. There are going to be condominiums, there's going to be big houses on the lake, there's going to be public housing, there's going to be townhouses, and we have to keep that and let this be a place for everybody, a place to live, work, and play, and to grow, and to start a family, and to want to come back and let people come here internationally. And as long as we keep it like that, that's what makes Reston special. If you want to be a place where there are not townhouses and public housing, there are plenty of places around Fairfax County you can go. This is a very wealthy community, county, but Reston is a jewel in that we accept everybody here. It's about acceptance, caring, and dignity. And so making sure that everyone can be here, keeping the beauty of Reston, the nature, all those are very important to me.
And the one word that really sort of resonates for me that we really need to focus on is community. Because I feel like with the changes that are coming in the next decade or two, that's a real opportunity to really enrich the community. And of course, the risk that it's going to just, you keep adding more diversity, and at some point you hit a tipping point, it becomes harder and harder to hold the center. And so I think that really driving to have those cultural, recreational, whatever opportunities to bring people together from all the different parts of Reston, all the different walks of life within Reston is going to be really important.
In response to that question, I was drawn to the principle about dignity of each individual and the importance of that. And this question had started, what's your contribution to Reston? And in my time I taught the leadership class at South Lakes High School, and I taught leadership by way of service because it could be whatever curriculum I wanted it to be. So I taught leadership by way of service, and over the course of 12 years, we did a lot of things and activities for Reston families and Reston people and South Lake students. And almost always those ideas came to me from students. The tsunami hit and my cell phone rang, and students saying, when we get back to school, we've got to do something. Or I had a student come to me and say, I've just learned that somebody in my Spanish class has cancer and we've got to do something for him. And that was our fight for a Seahawk. And we raised $23,000 for this family. And I sat and paid bills to Children's Hospital and then gave the family everything else we had when we raised that money. And the children didn't know who the child was who had the cancer. They just did it. And this group of 20 kids mobilized the greater South Lakes community in a way I've never seen a group mobilized before. And we were getting checks from South Lakes alum who lived in Luxembourg. And we created Friends of South Lakes High School on Facebook. It was the reason I joined Facebook, because I hadn't been on it. And I started a Friends of South Lakes High School group, and the word just went bang, bang, all over the world. And I remember getting something from somebody who lived in a very far away rural place, and they said, I can't do PayPal, I can't do any of these things, how can I get money to you as soon as you need it? And we did multiple things like that. We had the boy who was killed crossing Reston Parkway a handful of years ago, walking home. He was one of my students at South Lakes. And the dignity, it was insisted upon by way of his peers that he was buried, and his life, the memorial was done with dignity, despite the fact that these people had nothing. We went to their home off of Glade Drive. It was about 98 degrees. It was on a July day. And they had no air conditioning on because the bills hadn't been paid. And they're all sitting there sobbing and sweating. I mean, it was so hot in there. We went to pay our respects. That group of kids over the summer mobilized. We raised $18,000, bought a burial plot, bought a headstone, did a service at South Lakes because people just came out of the woodwork. I'm a caterer, I'll put it on for you. Everybody bring something. We had more food, we sent them home with so much food. And it was all about the dignity of people. And it was my only job in that, my contribution was that I provided the opportunity for people to do good. And people in Reston do. So I think that needs to be held very tightly as we move forward and grow.
We're going to take a brief non-stop break, but Ellen is going to share some words of wisdom.
I left them at home. But we're going to do our raffle. Has everyone received a ticket? If you have not, please raise your hand. And to answer you, Tom, just sitting here listening to this panel, I think I can go home and rest really well tonight. I mean, such smart, compassionate community folks. Thank you so much. Okay, we have two wonderful prizes tonight, but before I start, I hope everyone here is a member of the Reston Museum. You do not have to live in Reston, like you don't have to live in DC to be part of the Smithsonian. So if you're not a member, I certainly invite you to join tonight. Our two prizes. This is called Open Community, and we also have the background information on the poster. Second prize is a year's membership to the museum. So I'm going to ask my good friend Joe Stowers here to pick the winner. If it's yours, you have to put it back. You want to read the number? Here.
It's 739957.
No.
How appropriate, right? The second one. What's the membership? Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
I said there was a fix on it.
How about the number ending 931?
That's me.
Oh, okay. Well, Linda, you can have it for next year. Or you can re-gift it. So now this is the portion of our program we're opening it up for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone over to you. This gentleman in the back, and I'll be right back to you.
Lindsay, I think I just take issue with some of the things you said about the community coming out and being so wonderful. I think like anything else, it takes the leadership, and it doesn't just happen. I think people are generally going to respond to needs in their community. We just have a community where the leadership exercises this, makes the people under them, students, community members, museum members, RA members, and it wasn't always this way. RA, I remember in the 70s, 80s, had a bunch of know-nothings who didn't want to do anything for the community. It was all about, we don't want to spend any more money. So it's not just a great place. It takes a leadership to make it a great place, and we're lucky enough, and the RCC, we're lucky enough to have leaders who, are, in my eyes, enlightened and want to do good things. So don't be too humble about it. It's like any institution. It takes the leadership, and it takes keeping it in front of people, that we value diversity. We value being nice to people. We value saying hello on the pathways. You've got to keep repeating it. I mean, you know this, I don't have to tell you, but the rest of us may not be so aware of it, and I think we've got great leadership here.
Thank you, Phil. Linda?
Well, I have a couple of comments. First of all, about the future and so forth. Many of us came here, and our family certainly did, because we had heard that it was an integrated community in Fairfax County. And I'm wondering if that is still the reason people are coming here, and if they have the same dedication that we all have toward that kind of thing, because that was the most important. We didn't know what the buildings looked like, we didn't know anything like that. We just knew it was an integrated community in Fairfax County, which didn't have very many integrated communities. And I'm wearing, by chance tonight, my Lake Ann sweatshirt from when I went to Lake Ann. It was the first school, people, built in Virginia, had to be integrated. That is, other schools were integrated because they've been around. But Lake Ann School, for all those of you, that was the first school built for that purpose. Lisa, you brought back a memory that was really nasty, and it's the one where we had this big, huge meeting about the boundaries and so forth. And it was, the people in Reston were fine with everything. It was the people from the other, right outside the neighborhood. They were willing to let their kids, and still are, their kids take extra, I don't know how long to get to where they're going. And luckily, by the way, I keep hearing that South Lakes is now a school bringing people in rather than people leaving, and that delights me. It delights me that it's another Restonian that's the principal and grew up here. But I remember being where I was very active in the education, and I remember those parents coming into South Lakes, seeing the cafeteria with all its different colors and so forth, and then leaving there and demanding that their kids go to Oakton or someplace else. Oakton, which by the way had a black principal, who just happens to be his mother. So I mean, but I think the most important thing that we have to keep, I don't think we have to worry about the subsidized housing as much, because I think each of our plans is right now includes that, and the renovation here of Lake Ann and all. But I think we've got to keep the spirit of everybody being inclusive, and kids growing up where my daughter had a black teacher, I'll use your term, black teacher for second grade. I didn't know it till I got to school tonight, because kids just didn't come home and say, guess what I have? I went, who knew? So I think it's wonderful that your guys are still here. You have to move back, but anyway, at least you're contributing so well, Tara said. And I appreciate it because my granddaughter is there.
First of all, I want to echo what Phil Lilienthal said. You got to work on it. And one example, he cited the problem with, we had a bunch of jerks on the RA board. Well, we had to get rid of them. And so we organized something called Alliance for a Better Community to work on getting people like all the people who are here in this room elected to the RA board, the RCA board, and whatever it was. There was one other example. What you had to say, Linda, about the school boundaries. we had to have people in office like Stu Gibson, who really knew how to work on it. And I'll give you some other examples like that. We really have to be represented by elected officials who really know how to do things. And probably the best example, at least for me, is Kathy Hutchins. You talked about, we have affordable housing. Well, when we came here, we decided to come here, incidentally, 50 years ago, because we wanted our kids to grow up like you did, and they did, fortunately. We're white Catholics. We have 3 marriages among our kids. None of them are white Catholics. One married into a Jewish family, another married into an immigrant Philippine family, and where am I?
She's white Catholic.
Too many kids, Sheriff.
Well, anyway, yeah. Oh, man.
But they're
Oh, yeah, but their oldest daughter married an African American. I mean, they had the right experience, and that's why we came here. That was the kind of community we wanted them to grow up in. It also took a lot of work. For example, you cited a lot of things about the kind of people who live here and affordable housing, and let's divide that into subsidized housing and market housing. When we came here, there was market housing in apartments and so on that weren't too bad in terms of price, and townhouses and so on, but there were no subsidized housing. So when things changed and Bob got pushed out, we had to organize. We didn't have a hospital, we had to get one. We didn't have an HMO, we didn't have one. We didn't have a bus system, we had to get one. And we had to have subsidized affordable housing. So one of the first things we did in 1967, 68, this is before your time, we had to organize a way to get it produced. So we held a conference on housing, and it brought together people from 6 religious groups that we had here, and they formed Reston Interfaith, and they built housing, and we do have affordable housing. We got them all over the place. Paul mentioned how wonderful it is to have the diversity of housing around the USGS. Well, there was a time when we had a different kind of problem that you're too young to remember. Unfortunately, the developer built all housing without any affordable dwelling units in the South Lakes area, South Lakes Village area. And the community where the growth was occurring was there, and the community was in opposition to any more affordable housing because they saw problems in the area where you're talking about. And of course, you may remember there were problems. And so we had to work our butt off to get the attitude of the community back on track, the way you have all expressed it. It took a lot of hard work over about a 10-year period to bring it back to where it was. Getting somebody elected like Kathy Hutchins was part of it. I could go on and on about that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Jeff.
I just have a comment. Where I live in the town center area, and there is a wonderful sense of neighborliness and community and so forth. However, I must say it is a transitional area, and many of the people that transition in have no idea of Bob Simon's 7 principles. And I have a suggestion. I don't know if it's in effect or, but I think that the realtors that sell in Reston should make those persons that are moving into Reston or considering, they should make them aware. I mean, this might be a place to start. Have them make those persons moving in aware of what Reston really is. So that, and that would be very helpful in maintaining the setting principles that we're all so appreciative of.
Thank you, Thea.
Yeah, back in the bad old days, they did. They did make people aware of what it was. When I came to Reston, Bob was here. I came 3 years after the Stowers, and there were less than 500 of us then, right? And we did a show in the barn. If anybody's on Facebook and you know Jeff Thomas is one of the Millenniums, and he has a whole series of pictures of what Reston looked like in the day. And he keeps asking how many of the kids got hurt on the sculpture out here. He didn't know why Bob wanted to hurt the children. It was lovely, but they all climbed and fell off of it. But I think one of the things is that once people get here, if they actually go to RA's Newcomers Night, if they come to the RCC Newcomers Night, we let them know what Reston is. Because we had this young lady who came in and said, I've never lived in the suburbs before. And I said, well, Washington is a suburb of Reston. So you're not living in one now. Because it started from the first people who came here. We came here as a community. My family thought I was crazy because there weren't that many. There were so few blacks here, we made the ebony cover. So if you go back and look at 67, you will see us in pictures. Yeah, but we came because there was a feeling, and it is what Kathy talks about all the time, it's community. There is a feeling, because Lisa's now on the board at the community center, you're over at RA. I mean, everybody is involved, and that is what this place does. You want to be part of what makes it work. And so when we run into these people, we just let them know. This is not a suburb. We care about each other, and we do that with our community service, those of us who have the money who can put into it, but we all care and we do. That's the one thing that I think Bob made us really conscious of. We do. I know. We're a
just to add to your story, at that time there were 400 people living here, men, women, and children. And a guy came to see me in the farmhouse where I was working, and he said he wanted to borrow the riding ring in the horse barn. And I said, for what? He said, for theater. Well, I said, okay. And then he said, but don't give us any advice. We don't want your advice. Well, it's good that he said that, because what they planned was absolutely crazy. What they planned was not our town or something sensible. They planned a musical, an original musical, and the theme of it was Wall Street, the greatest game in town. So, of those 400 people, 100 were involved in this thing, one way or another. Some were involved as actors, some were involved as stagehands, and the rest of them were involved in promotion. And they sold, these 400 people sold 2,000 tickets. They sold those tickets by going into the district where they worked and saying, if you buy 2 tickets to this show, you'll get a free dinner in a Reston home. So that was a success, but to give you a notion of those 400 people, there was a chorale. I sang in that chorale. There was an interest in art, so that when somebody moved into an industrial company took a rental or bought a building, they got an original work of art given to us from the museum in Richmond, where the guy was interested in what we were doing, and we bought these works of art from him. At any rate, it was an extraordinary community, and one of the reasons it was so extraordinary was the local brokers discouraged people coming from here because of the situation, and they said, among other things, you don't want to go there, they're communists. So that's one extreme, but there were some people, and I knew a couple who were out in the Midwest or someplace or other and packed their bags and came here because they read the story. So these 400 were exceptional. The reason I'm stressing this is obviously this gets watered down. We don't have 60,000 dedicated people. And the challenge is to see how many of the people who move here and live here can get it. That's the challenge. And there's no formula for that. But the suggestion that the real estate brokers could do something about that, just for your information, I was asked to and went to Long and Foster and gave them the rest of the story. All the brokers in Long and Foster were pulled in, and they want to do it. So that's one way of spreading the word.
Thank you, Bob.
I actually have a question. And I'm trying to phrase it in a way that doesn't sound like one you've probably been asked 25 times already. Obviously, all of you are activists and are involved or have been involved in boards and committees and school and all that. But I serve on, I'm a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee to RA, and we struggle for diversity, and it's not only ethnic diversity, but age diversity. And it's partly because people who are my age have more free time, particularly than people with kids. But I'm just wondering, not the usual question is how can we get younger people on the boards, but what do people who are in your spheres of social interaction, what do they care about? What would they want to see here? I mean, we've got developers coming in giving presentations about the new Lake Ann and the new Fellowship House and the new this and that. And when I listen to them, it sounds like they're building for young techies with money. And that's not what we want, we all know that, but how do we get what we want, and how do younger people, what are they thinking about? What would motivate them to show up at a developers meeting and say something?
This mic doesn't work. Well, one thing I can say, and actually, I'm not going to pick on Mr. Simon, but he just did a wonderful job pushing, and I see Phil Lilienthal's back there too, pushing and pulling people together, not just in Reston and Fairfax County. He's a firm believer that kids should not have idle time, they should not be downtime. And one of the things that young families in Reston, it's very different than maybe with those 400 families. Most of the young moms in Reston work. So what they're thinking about a lot in the summertime is that they're not having their kids be busy all the time, but having something to do instead of just sitting idle. So what Mr. Simon and all these other people in Reston Community Center did was they had a camp expo. The young families are really interested about what kind of we know we do culturally for them, but there was a camp expo. It was packed. It was packed with all the rest of the families like, okay, I need something for my kids to do all the not-for-profit camps. So a lot of families are thinking about what is it can do for our families, it's affordable, and for our children as well. You know, they know some of the adult things, but people are very busy. And so very often it's like, what can we do in the community for our families? And then to touch on a little bit, you really, some of us get involved on our own, and sometimes we're encouraged. My name gets put up for so many things in my church, the museum board. I guess because people see me here, but you really, my mom's like, sometimes you have to, I'm not busy, I'm just involved, I'm committed, you know, I'm not one of those people that complain. If I do, I get involved and become the change. You know, you can't sit there and complain. So when someone complains about South Lakes High School, so get involved, it's a good school. Or go to this, you can't complain. So for those young families, if you see someone, invite them. Some people just don't know. And I say, come in, and when you invite people, they start doing things. So it might be going to different things, going to a playground. It sounds weird, going to a playground and inviting younger people in. The 20s, the 30s, the 30s, the 40s, the 40s, the 50s, the whole thing. You have to invite people. Because some people, they are busy, and unless they get that gentle nudge or invite, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think that in this era, all of the volunteer activities, they need to market, they need to tweet, they need to reach out to people online, and they also, and not just marketing. I would just say marketing overall, because even for your environmental group, just coming out on Saturdays and being at the Reston Farm Market so people know who you are and that you exist and what it is that, just letting the community know what it is that you need. Because I have, been on the board of directors for League of Women Voters. I've done, a lot of things, but I just, you just can't, I think that, you have to be the squeaky wheel.
And speaking as a mother of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, a lot of times those meetings are a very difficult time. I would love to come to all of them about everything, but as I was telling Tom earlier, this is a late night out for me. Talk about being busy, you're really busy all the time. But one thing that I would be interested in, that I would fight for, is not just family activities. Talk about a camp expo, that would be great, and I would be interested in that, but intergenerational activities. So not just something for my kids, but something that I can do with my kids and my parents and my grandma, who also lives here. So what can we all do together, and what would matter to all of us? That's the kind of thing that's important to me, because I feel like intergenerational activities aren't something that you find everywhere. There's a lot of kid stuff now. There's a lot of kid stuff now, to the point where kids don't know how to do anything that's not kid stuff. So I like activities that kind of force kids to be able to make those distinctions. So anyway.
Well, and just two quick things. First of all, I agree about opportunities for activities that are intergenerational, really are very inclusive of, especially the younger ones. But also in terms of having people be more engaged, people who have younger kids, as I do, having opportunities for them to participate without having to be at that 7 o'clock meeting, without having to be at that 6 o'clock meeting that's going to run for hours. When I was on the RA board, oh my goodness, those meetings, sometimes I would have meetings that would start at 6:30, and we would have to pass essentially a motion to extend it past 11 o'clock. Ridiculous. But there's no reason in this day and age that you have to be in that room from 6 until 11 to participate and to be part of it. And so, to be able to have some way of participating online somehow where you're not bound to that evening meeting, I think is critical for including people who are, who have less open time in their schedule.
I've had 17-minute meetings at the community center. That's my record.
Well, one more. Lindsay?
I was just going to say, I don't think a lot of people know that they can play a part, that they can have a voice in what you were talking about. So I think the big push should be, ads in the connection, or ads in that say, do you want to play a part in the redesigning, or do you have thoughts on, those kinds of things? I don't think people really think I can play a part in this.
Okay. We have someone back here, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I am just so proud to be here. My name is Shelley Carpenter-Farquharson. I work at South Lakes and also graduated from South Lakes and taught there 10 years after I graduated. To piggyback on what Lindsay said, I really think that we could have a campaign that's in the schools, that's in the nursing homes, that's in the library, that's in various parts of Reston, to further this conversation. I would love to see this panel in a school. I mean, a lot of the students that we're talking about don't know the history. I didn't know it, and I graduated in '92, a long time ago. But, you know, those kind of things showing the students, seriously, I didn't. I mean, but I'm so proud that as a teacher, I could be able to afford to move back here 3 years ago. It's something, a big sacrifice that was meant a lot to me. So I think if we can look at this, maybe Reston 7 or some kind of campaign, or like you're saying, tweeting and social media, to infuse all of the diversity, especially the age, and get over to South Lakes, take this panel on the road. I mean, you've got an opportunity here of history, of people that really care, and that could spread the word at Town Center. Instead of a concert, it could be a panel, or just think outside the box to further the message, because honestly, there are people, there are neighbors that don't really know and don't appreciate all that we know and that we value and just know is a blessing and a gift. A lot of people in living here do not know. So I'd like to see this conversation continue.
Thank you very much. Is there
I just
anyone
wanted
else?
to suggest that there is a newcomers night periodically run by Reston Association, and at that time the turnout is 25 people maybe. So the question is, how can you get more people to go to newcomers night? Most people probably don't pay any attention to the Reston newspapers. Maybe for a year or two, maybe. How do you do it? I don't know. But there is newcomers night.
Okay, is there anyone else who has not had the opportunity to speak who would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Piggybacking on what this young lady said, my daughter couldn't be here tonight, and she grew up in Reston, but she was like, is anyone taping this? You know, if you can't go on the road or anything, oh, good, okay. Okay, great, we'll handle that. All right, very good. Do something with that tape.
We will. Any other questions?
Well, actually, it's a comment. I looked up there, and Tom, I accept you. Every one of you has a parent or parents living in Reston now, don't you? Each one of you. I have a son who is in the foreign service, but his base is here in Reston, and my grandchildren are going to 2 schools that he went to, and it's just going to be such a thrill to think that you know, every one of you, and you know, I think it's really neat.
Thank you, Linda. Can we, Jody, comment?
I'll be first.
I said you gotta keep doing things, and one example of that is affordable housing. Kathy Hutchins pushed the board to dedicate 1 penny for affordable housing. It got cut because of the downturn of the economy. We have to get it back, and we do need it in the newly developing areas, because a lot of housing is going to get built without it. Now, Kathy did an absolutely fantastic job in writing the RFP for the development that's going to take place here. There's going to be great affordable housing in the Lake Ann area. But the developer, you got to work on him. He's a good developer, the one doing the redevelopment of Lake Ann. But there's a lot of things that's wrong with what he's doing, and you got to work on it. And we're going to have many, many developers. Fortunately, over the years, we've had pretty good developers. When it comes to the new areas and the station areas, we're going to have thousands of new people. You have to work on getting good developers there. And that's something we've done throughout the history since we really got involved back in the late 60s. And we have to, there are some good ones, but there are an awful lot of ones who just won't put a darn nickel into affordable housing, and they resist it, and we really do have to work on that.
Thank you, Joe. On behalf of the museum, I would certainly like to thank the panelists. I think you have been absolutely outstanding. And I certainly would like to thank our audience for coming out tonight. I really appreciate your participation. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator, Mr. Tom Ahart.
I want to just echo what Ellen just said. I want to thank the panel. I feel like the parent watching my children have grown up, and it's wonderful. Your response to the questions and your interest in what this panel was about is much appreciated. And I too wish we could can it and send it on out to the rest of the community. My final comment is that on the future of Reston, I don't see developing ever in Reston the kinds of neighborhoods and communities that exist in major urban areas and even in some suburban communities as I travel around the country. And I think the reason for that is that we in Reston have been ever diligent and ever vigilant in insisting on the future looking like a repeat of what we have successfully done for the last 50 years. And Bob, it's all good to your good thinking, and it's much appreciated. And that's my final thoughts.
I'm not sure what else there's to say, but thank you. And Bob, in kind of relation to what you were saying, I think a lot of the way to get the word out about the new resident thing that RA does is neighbor telling neighbor. We have a great cluster association, and when I moved in, I still remember the day we moved in, the very day, our neighbors came by with a reusable shopping bag from Whole Foods full of groceries for us to welcome us to the neighborhood. They put in it information about our neighborhood, about our cluster, contact list for everybody that lived there. You could talk to clusters first, since they're the easiest and they're already organized, about slipping in information about the next meeting to people that move in. Because I still remember that. I mean, I knew what I was coming back to, but it still kind of surprised me that the very day we moved in, and then the next day I had somebody else come over with homemade cookies, and the day after that I had somebody come on. It's just, it's community like that, and that's what's so special about us.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Ahart and Mrs. Graves and the other folks that brought everybody together. I hadn't seen Lindsay Trout since high school, and that was a long time ago. And it's just wonderful to have this back and forth and this sort of give and take with community members. And I just wanted to say thank you also to the audience for coming out and listening to our viewpoints.
I'd like to just echo that. Thank you everyone for coming out. It was a pleasure being on the panel. I love that I've made Reston my home. It's neat to see some fellow high school friends around here. And this is my home. I think I'm going to be here for a long time. So thanks a lot.
Thanks to Tom and Ellen and Ed and everybody else, and thanks to everyone for coming out here. And yeah, I'll be here a long time. I already warned my parents that when I turn 70, I'm kicking them out of their condo. And my wife and I are moving into theirs. So we're going to be in Reston for a long time.
Build that motorcycle. That's right. I just wanted to thank you. I think my school faculty and school families get tired of me saying the things that I've shared here tonight. So it was probably nice for them to have a different audience, because it's a passion and it's kind of who we are. So it was nice to share it with you.
Closing remarks.
I was just going to talk to you, but one of the things when you form a new panel next time around, I would suggest, when we came here, all the people who were living in Reston